Today we look at, well, today actually we clean a rather rough-looking Nimcha. You can see it right in front of your eyes. There's a bunch of rust, and the hilt is rather damaged as well. This, as you may be hearing, is a voiceover because the audio unfortunately didn't record on this video and the few other cleaning ones I recently recorded. So please bear with me in this case. As you can see, the horn grip here is heavily damaged too. You see a bunch of delamination, holes, deep cracks. It basically seems like it dried up to the point it shrunk and started delaminating. You even see some deep holes. You'll see here actually how dry it is. It's missing also the bottom button where the tang would kind of be pinned. And you'll see some cracks over there at the top. These would normally be covered by a ferrule. You see here a lip where the ferrule would be sitting at some point, but that's long gone. Also, the tang, you'll see, is fixed in a rather interesting way. The end of the tang is basically bent over the grip here. This may be just a later modification when the blade was already damaged, but it is a legitimate way of fixing the blade in place, so it's historically accurate. You'll also notice it's missing its knuckle guard here. Whether this was a natural break, like an accident, or it was cut off at some point by the owner is hard to tell. And that is because the edge of the break here is very smooth and very straight. So whatever happened, it gives me the impression that someone then went in and kind of cleaned up the edges to make it look or feel a little more, well, a little better, I suppose. We also see it has the usual 3 quillins, upturned quillins, with kind of that rounded finial. That's very typical of Nimchas. Looking at the blade, we can see a bunch of red rust. So this is still active. We can also see some patination underneath. But of course, the removal of rust is going to be our priority in this video. You'll see the blade has 3 fullers that run kind of up to the false edge we just saw at the tip there. And the edge is in fairly good shape, I would say. The whole blade, actually, overall, is not in the worst shape I've seen. So I think once the red rust here is removed and the blade is stabilized, we should be okay. We're going to be using the usual sponge on the more abrasive side, because given the conditions of this blade, let's say the fear of scour marks is definitely not my main priority, but it's rather being able to remove all of that gunk. Also using Autosol. If you know any of my previous videos, you'll know that this is a fairly standard part of my cleaning process. And as you can see, I'm laying the blade flat on a hard surface so that I can actually apply some pressure while I run the sponge along the blade. Along the blade, by the way, is the best way to work, so parallel to the length of the blade rather than perpendicular. This will avoid leaving ugly scour marks if you're working with a more delicate and better and a blade in better shape. Whatever you do, though, never cross patterns. So if you're going lengthwise, which you should, just keep going lengthwise. Don't then move to cleaning perpendicular, because that is going to really leave ugly marks, or at least will risk that. You can also see that after the first passages, the movement already becomes a little more smooth. That is because the rust, you can see, is now transferring to the sponge, basically. So as it gives way, you'll normally feel the blade slide better under the sponge and kind of respond better to your movement. This is a good sign, of course. Also, don't forget the spine, especially on blades that are like very rusted like this. It's a good idea to clean every side of them and not just focus on the blade. So, well, and then it's just an issue of going in increments, let's say. So clean a little bit, then take a look, make sure that things are not going too fast for your liking and that you're not removing too much stuff. This is not the case, of course, on this blade. But in blades in better condition, you want to really be careful at each step you take. You can already see, by the way, here the striking difference between the side that has already been roughly cleaned and the side that is still, let's say, out of the antique shop. This, by the way, was literally a umbrella holder by, together with a bunch of tulwars and koras I bought. Umbrella holders, if you frequent antique shops, you'll know that many of them have a kind of umbrella bucket somewhere in some corner, and this usually contains a whole bunch of like canes, sticks, and oftentimes swords. So usually they're there because they're in really, really bad shape. They've been neglected both over the course of time, but also by the shopkeeper that usually just kind of puts them there and forgets about them. So this sword and the upcoming ones we will be cleaning in future videos are from literally an umbrella holder. So now I'm doing something that I would not necessarily always recommend, which is pinching the blade in your hand and kind of running, cleaning both sides at the same time while holding the sword in your hand rather than leaning on a surface. I wouldn't recommend this because the pressure you apply to the two sides is not equal. In my experience, there's more pressure usually on the thumb side, and if you kind of get a little carried away, you can end up over polishing or over cleaning one side of the blade rather than the other. And you also tend to end up naturally focusing more on the midsection of the blade as well. So you don't kind of move down up to the tip, let's say, and then down up to the end of the blade where it meets the hilt. So if you're doing this, which is not necessarily what I would recommend for all swords, make sure that you rotate the blade fairly often and that you take a look constantly, that you're not kind of only working the midsection. This is obviously okay to do if the blade is in really rough shape. And another reason why you shouldn't do it probably is that this exposes your fingers to the edge of the blade. So if you mishandle it by any chance, and if the blade is slightly sharp, which this one, by the way, is enough that it could cut, it's very easy for you to damage yourself and injure yourself. So this is not an endorsed method. I kind of use it every once in a while on relic condition blades because it's quicker and easier, but yeah, I do not recommend it. I'll also give a pass here to the hilt. The hilt, luckily, is not in the worst shape, so it does have a little bit of rust there, but it's really nothing too terrible. I'm trying to avoid getting out the sole kind of in the crannies there between the grip and hilt. That's mostly because autosol can leave like whitish residue that then is a pain to clean. I know it's already going to be a pain to clean the part under the langet or like between the hilt and the blade, but it's still a part that needs to be cleaned, so a quick pass will not hurt. And by the way, a quick pass of cleaning, whether with autosol or with an oil like Ballistol, is just what you should do with your swords every time you receive them. You don't know who's handled them, so even if it's in very good condition, just give it a wipe, because oils may be on the blade or in little nooks and crannies and you want to remove them. So to remove them from nooks and crannies, a toothbrush is often a very good method. Make sure it's not like a hard bristle one though. And here we have the sword after a first pass overall with autosol. You'll see that most of the red rust has been removed. I'm now cleaning it with a rag. This, of course, you see it clean because the autosol is kind of moist and wet, so it gives the impression of it being clean, but you still have to wipe it with a rag because a lot of the dirt and kind of sludge, you'll see here it's being removed. So it looks clean, but once you clean it, you'll see it look really clean. And in fact, if you look at the rag here, you'll see a whole bunch of brown sludge that's kind of come off of the blade. And you'll still see a bunch of patination and kind of dark stains on the blade, but I'm not really concerned with those. Those are part of the natural aging of the blade, so as long as they're not eating through the steel, I'm not too worried about them. I may clean them more in the future, but I think we're okay. What's beautiful about this blade are the three fullers. You'll see they're very regular. The top one ends right there where the blade dips towards the false edge. I kind of have the impression that this may be a European blade, but I do not see any markings on it or anything, so I don't know. It could also definitely be a locally produced blade. And as good as a first pass with autosol may be, which I have to say the results are definitely pretty good, I think the conditions of this blade don't necessarily make a second application of Autosol an issue. So I think we're going to go ahead and run another round of Autosol on the blade and kind of polish it a little more and see if we get any better results. So of course, the more you polish, the smoother things become. You kind of get a feel for it as you go forward in the process. And it's up to you when you feel comfortable enough to stop. Uh, Autosol does not really remove a lot of material. I would say it's negligible, the amount of material being removed. So I wouldn't be too concerned with like damaging the blade or anything. It's not like you're working with sandpaper or with power tools. However, keep in mind that patination and like natural aging of the blade is something that is in many cases very desirable. So if you're working with like fancier blades, more expensive blades, or if you're concerned in any way with the monetary value of a sword, you may want to proceed a little more carefully than what I'm doing here. And here you see how quickly a pass without the soil can be done when the blade is already in fairly decent condition. So now we can wipe it down again, remove more of that sludge that's coming off. And you'll see, I don't know if really there's a lot of visible difference here, but it can't hurt to pass that second time. So if we take a look at it now, you'll see that you start seeing the steel shining through a little, but it still maintains its antique character. The blade is quite smooth now to the touch. And that's usually what I look for in the blade more than it looking good. Once it feels kind of smooth, then I'm usually happy with it. Of course, I'll have to clean the area there under the langet a little more thoroughly. And I'm kind of a little concerned with the tang. You can see there's some red rust underneath. So given the tank has been exposed to the elements, since the grip is so open, I don't know what to do there. Like on the one hand, I don't want to remove the grip and damage it in any way, but at the same time, I don't want the tank to rust away unnoticed. So I'll have to figure out what to do. In the meantime, it's all about kind of figuring out the ways to get that autosol residue off of the visible areas at least. In this case, I'm kind of jamming the rag there in between the langets and then kind of pulling. This is a method that works sometimes, not always. Another way you could use, of course, like a cotton swab or any kind of small, delicate tool to kind of wipe away that residue from hidden areas. But it's up to you what works. And it's also up to the sword, of course. Each sword is different, and what works for one may not work for the other. I will mention that I will try to treat that dry horn with some oil, and it probably won't be just a wipe down as I'm doing now with ballistol, but it'll probably involve immersing the horn in oil and leaving it like overnight or over time. I've heard that this can work miracles on horn. It kind of rehydrates it in a sense, not hydrates because, well, oil isn't water-based, of course, but it helps definitely with the shrinkage and the dryness of the bone or the horn grip. I've never tried to do like a bath in oil at the moment so far, so this is maybe a good candidate to test it for the first time. Worst case scenario, of course, it would be terrible to lose a historical piece of sword, but this grip is already damaged enough that I think it's a good candidate for a test. So in the meantime, a quick oil wipe, and that's not going to hurt. And we'll also, of course, oil up the entire blade because that's what usually then gives it its final look of being like clean and shiny and well preserved. So you don't need a lot of oil here. I tend to use a lot of everything. I usually I'm quite heavy-handed both with the Autosol and the Ballistol, but you don't need to be. and just make sure everything is oiled and cleaned. And now time to wipe the blade down. Sometimes the difference here can be quite dramatic. Once you clean it, you really see, it's almost like adding contrast in a picture, and you really see the details. Okay, and I think we're seeing that here as well. If we look at the fullers, and especially I think if we look at the, yeah, so here you can see the blade is now shiny. The fullers, I think, have more detail to them. And I think especially the section of the false edge towards the tip is what really looks the best. Um, Now that it's been cleaned and oiled. Actually, I have to say that the blade is a very, very lovely blade. I did not expect it to be that nice. So I hope this Nimcha can be restored to better, well, to something that is not as much of a relic looking piece, because yeah, I think that blade is a very beautiful one, so it deserves to be on a decent looking sword. In any case, this was the cleaning of the Nimcha. Sorry for the technical difficulties. I hope the voiceover doesn't sound too disconnected from reality, but I would have hated to have to throw away the footage, and maybe someone finds it interesting. Anyway, thank you for watching, and I'll see you soon in another sword video. Bye.